How do you put the fear about this coronavirus stuff into perspective and understand how your mind's working around it? That's today's topic. I'm HeathMD, psychoanalyst for Freudalicious Mind. Get to know your mind and live authentically. And so there's a lot of press, there's a lot of attention with this. There's a virus that's causing a lot of infections, and I want to two things. I want to talk about the real data about it, and because there's information and misinformation about it, and it's not as scary as some people make it out to be, but it is a thing to be concerned about. But more importantly, I think, is how your mind reacts to it, because you can be concerned, or you can have like abject terror about something, and there's no reason to be terrified. Actually, the panic kind of gets in your way. There's a couple of sources of information. I've put two of them in the description below on this video. The CDC, the AMA, the World Health Organization. I've left an article down there for that has information about how to stay safe in the context of all this also. But and by the way, the fear is actually kind of helpful. Some fear, if we were in denial about it, if we thought, "Well, yeah, it'll go away, that really kind of gets in your way of responding to things, and so in a way, some of the fear causes us to pay attention. It's kind of maybe an evolutionary thing, but it becomes too big too quickly. This panic and fear. So what is coronavirus? The infection from the coronavirus has two main symptoms. There's a cough and there's fever. It's generally a low-grade fever, but it's a fever. 101.5 is the average in a lot of the Wuhan studies. There's a couple of studies. Look at the links below that have come out of Wuhan, China, and there's a typical presentation. And on X-rays, there's a certain presentation. It's a typical viral infection when you look at it, as far as the X-rays are concerned, uh, but uh, but it spreads quickly. And in certain populations, it can really cause problems. Like if and this is from the Wuhan studies as well. Generally, like if you're under about 50, it's not going to cause a lot of problems for you. And, there's some anecdotal evidence that there's some deaths in younger people, but it's generally people who have a lot of medical conditions already, and it's generally people above 60 years old. And so we really need to protect those people from this infection, and that's one of the reasons to pay attention to it. And so it can get bad quickly in that population. And so what do you do about it? It's the same kind of thing that you do during a flu epidemic. I mean, we've had the flu that's been so bad in this country that we shut down schools and things like that. And during flu season, you wash your hands. You wash your hands frequently. If you're sick, don't go to work. Stay home if at all possible. And if not, talk with your employer about other options. Um, and if you get real sick, you kind of know when you have the flu when you need to go to the doctor, because the flu could really cause problems for you too. Hi, Mattis. Uh, Good to hear that there's only one positive case of this coronavirus in Latvia, where Mattis is. Um, but oh my gosh, she dropped her pizza. That's very sad to lose it. I understand. It's some food is so precious that you don't mind dropping it and picking it back up. But yeah, think about where you are too. But I'm talking about the coronavirus. And when you get real ill from any illness, like the flu can cause problems too. You kind of have an idea about when you do need to go to the doctor. But if you just have a cough and a low-grade fever, and you're generally feeling like you're doing okay, yeah, it's best not to overload the hospitals and the doctors. but it's important to have a relationship with a doctor and go ahead and do that now because that's one of the steps because you can do things and that will keep you from feeling quite so powerless about this illness. For instance, wash your hands. For instance, if you don't have a doctor, find one now. Find a relationship, even if it's with a corner clinic. Make sure that you know where they are. If there's a way to get in to get a physical now when things are kind of quiet, do so because you may need a doctor to consult. Uh, uh, but the bigger problem actually may be to businesses. I mean, if a lot of people are ill, it's not like people are. This isn't the bubonic plague of the Middle Ages, where a third of the population dies. This is not going to be like that. Uh, but it may be that a lot of people come down with it at the same time. That's part of why the strategy of containment, which the CDC is trying to contain the illness, they identify cases, they identify contacts of those cases, and they try to quarantine them. They try to keep them from being out in the population. If we can slow down the spread of this illness, there's a herd immunity, herd immunity, where the herd of people, in this case, the population, becomes kind of immune as a group. And once enough people become immune to the illness, it doesn't spread so fast. And people at higher risk, like older people or people with medical illnesses, are at lower risk then. Vaccines can create this herd immunity too, but it may be a while before we have a vaccine against this. But if we can slow down the spread in the community, it's going to protect the people at higher risk. But another thing to pay attention to is, like I began to say, there may be a lot of people ill off work at the same time. So this may have consequences to your business or to your job and that kind of thing. And so now, rather than panicking or becoming a hermit or something like that, better to, for instance, if you can pay down some of your debt, if you have debt, or try to save some and hold off on big expenses for the next 6 months, this would be a really wise thing because your businesses may have problems over the next few months. Also, if you can improve your health, now's the time to do it because you have some time. Even if this spreads like the World Health Organization says it's going to, you have enough time to get, if you can take a step towards exercise. And I'm not saying go to the gym twice a day and become an athlete if you're not near that already. But if taking a walk every day is a step for you, start walking. If you're on the edge of going back to the gym and like you let the New Year's resolution kind of go by the wayside, go to the gym once a week. Optimum would be 3 days a week for exercise. That's what the American Health Association recommends. Um, Mattis brings up the problems with misinformation and when do we go to the doctor? When do doctors test? And there has been some misinformation in the press and in our the political administration in getting a consistent message out. It's part of the reason to be informed. And again, for listeners that are just tuning in, there's some information in the description of this video below. There's a link to the American Medical Association information source, which has information from the Centers for Disease Control, from the World Health Organization. There's an article down there too. Become as informed as you can, and uh, one more thing. Think about your support network. Uh, think about, if you do get ill, who would help you out? Or who could you help out if they got ill? Bring them meals or that kind of thing. Uh, and who is at highest risk? Again, I'll repeat that really the high risk population is older people with medical illnesses. That's what's coming out of the Wuhan studies from China. And they need to be protected from catching bugs in general, the flu as well as this coronavirus. And so if we can structure our support network, And so I'm talking about things that are really doable, right? I'm not talking about um, oh, I don't know what kinds of, going into the forest and living by myself for the next 5 years. I mean, people are really extreme in what they're thinking about they need to do, or there's all kinds of Facebook ads about kind of hokey remedies. Just do what you do in a flu epidemic. Keep your hands clean in this kind of stuff, and that will slow down the spread of this. It'll decrease your risk, doable items. And so why, here's a psychoanalyst talking on YouTube Live about people panicking, right? People are really freaked out about this. The press, any article in the press just spreads like wildfire, and the press responds by putting more information out, and in ways it kind of feeds the fear. Uh, where's the fear coming from? There's a couple of levels to fear because okay, so there's concern. Yeah, we need to be concerned about this is a serious illness. It could spread and have consequences to the economy and to certain people's lives if you're at high risk. But do we need to be terrified? No. Where is the terror coming from? And so we psychoanalysts talk about when human beings get stressed, we get kind of melty. We kind of melt down a little bit. Our defense mechanisms, we call them, our kind of the way our mind works to deal with stress gets immature. It what we call regresses. It kind of goes back to an earlier stage of life. And if you go back too far, if you start thinking like a 5-year-old, 5-year-olds are scared a lot, especially if their parents aren't consistent. They have fears of the dark. They start fearing monsters under the bed. There's this kind of fear of the unknown that gets stirred up when scary stuff happens, when we're tired, when we're sick, when we're stressed. All of these kinds of things increases our risk of getting melty. And when you're melty, you start jumping to conclusions. And I would suggest that that's what's going on with a lot of the cultural fear. Also, we know, you might argue that, I'm a grown up. I'm not afraid of monsters under the bed anymore. But check out how popular the movie genre horror is. Horror movies are some of the most popular movies, and if you go to, I know people in the film industry, and if you go to film festivals, some of the more popular film festivals are based on horror genre, and so why do we like to be scared? Why do we get on roller coasters? Part of it's the getting thrown around, but part of it is the terror when you come over the hill on that roller coaster. We like to be scared. I've got a video about this actually. I'll put a link up on the screen when I go back after I record this. Uh, but there's this terror of the unknown, the terror of that which is maybe undescribable to us because it's unfathomable. It lives in us. It's the same as when you were 5 and you're scared of the dark. It's this uncertainty. If you can tolerate that, and in fact, in psychoanalysis, this is one of the things we talk about is that on the one hand, it feels as if there's a monster under my bed, and on the other, I know there's not. And so you can't just make the fear go away, but you can tolerate the fear, um, so that you can realize that it's actually not true. Mattis brings up a very good point that the more we think about it, the more the tension starts to build up. And so, you should be informed, but you shouldn't check whatever news source that you have every half hour. For instance, if you feel drawn to it, that's this melty stuff too, because we're looking basically for a parent. We're looking for some reassurance or to see how horrible it is now. And so people get in kind of a reinforcing cycle where the monster under the bed gets bigger and bigger and occupies our mind more and more. Uh, so So one thing to pay attention to, it's that the fear is bigger because of our reaction to it. Uh, and the other thing is, uh, I want to bring up, and this is a touchy subject, but 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 when this illness began to be known, and the epidemic in China, in Wuhan, began to get out of hand, there was a great deal of racism against Chinese people, against anyone that even looked Asian here in the United States. It kind of peaked, and I think it's decreased again, but there's this readiness for people. I mean, uh, every Asian person that you see today didn't just travel from Wuhan or doesn't have a cousin that lives in Wuhan. It's not like their appearance causes them um, to have and to carry this illness. But somehow there was a belief of that. It's a primitive thing. This is racism, and racism it has a couple of really primitive mechanisms. It's the same kind of thing that I was talking about before, where there's these uh, ways that our mind works from long ago, from when we were a kid, that come into play now. And things like black and white thinking, like it's either good or either bad. And there's this thing where we take the bad and we don't like the bad, and so we identify the bad onto someone else. And we don't even know who that is, which is another kind of immature thing where we don't realize that the other person is a complete person. So they get labeled with this mask, and we start blaming them for the illness or that kind of thing. And whether it's people of a certain race or people across the border or the neighbors that you happen to not like, it's other people, and you gotta know that that's another one of those things that it's a primitive reaction. It's us getting melty, trying to deal with something that's real and something that's stressful and something that can be handled. Because fact is, as I said before in this video, there are steps that you can take that really will keep you safe, as safe as can be. I'm not saying that we can ward off this illness, but you may get sick from it. You may have to go to the doctor and get some help for it, but you can decrease your risk. And as Mattis brings up, stressing, watching the news every 20 minutes, for instance, is going to knock out your immune system. That's another one of those things that you may have to make a rule for yourself, where I'm not going to check the news more than 3 times a day, maybe, or a decrease from what you're doing right now. It's the same thing as plugging in a little bit more exercise into your life, or watching your diet and making sure that you get a well-rounded diet, if at all possible. Uh, so to be careful about stress and panicking and getting melty, so that you can hold yourself together, so that you can take care of yourself, and we can live as a community. Um, so so I just wanted to bring that all up. I don't see a lot of psychologic kind of perspectives on people's reactions to the current pandemic, and so I wanted to put this out there. Uh, uh, I'm going to wrap up for now. I appreciate everybody tuning in and watching after the show, and take care of yourselves. I'll see you guys next time.